In anticipation of the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette being announced, I thought it would be a good time now to go through all of my Natasha Denona midi palettes and try to rank them. I own all of Natasha's midi palettes, so I'm going to be ranking every single one of them that has been released to date. And if you'd like to see my ranking, just keep on watching. So there are currently 8 Natasha Denona midi-sized palettes that exist. And I'm going to start at the bottom of my ranking with the Love palette. The Love palette, although it's beautiful, is actually the only one of Natasha's midi palettes that I've had issues with the quality of some of the shadows in it. So it's been a while since I've used this, so I might not be able to remember specifically which shades I've had issues with, but I'm pretty sure I've had issues with Intense right here, which is this really beautiful kind of rich, warm pink, but unfortunately it doesn't blend very well. I think Heart has caused me issues too, this gorgeous red. Heartbeat has also been a problem, and possibly Soul as well. So it's unfortunate that a lot of my favorite shades in this palette are actually the ones that give me issues. So for that reason, I just don't reach for this very often because I can never be sure how my look is going to turn out when I use this palette. And more often than not, I'm very disappointed with how it turns out and I have to remove it and start over or just go with a different palette entirely. So for that reason, the Love palette is the lowest in my ranking. Now for the rest of these, I feel like the order could change on any given day, so it was really hard, but I'm just going with how I feel today, and I think how I feel kind of overall in terms of which palettes I go to the most and which ones I'm most excited to use on an everyday type basis. So number 7 in my ranking is the Pastel palette. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this palette in my opinion. I know some people would like it to be more pigmented and I totally understand that, but for my skin tone, I find that these all build up really beautifully. They just take a little bit of building rather than giving you a ton of initial impact on your first dip into the pans with a lot of these colors. But I think the quality of this is excellent and I just love all of these pastel tones. It's such a happy looking palette and it's a really good go-to if I want to do a colorful look. This palette is really going to give me almost anything I could want to do a colorful pastel look. But because it's so colorful and I don't tend to gravitate toward colorful looks on an everyday basis, it's still number 7 in my ranking just because I don't go to it all that often, as I'm not going for colorful eyeshadow looks all that often. Number 6 in my ranking is the Sunrise palette. This is, I think, quite an underrated palette of Natasha Denona. The quality of this is excellent. At the time that this one came out, this was one of my all-time favorite palettes just because of the quality of all of these shadows. And the way that these colors work together and blend together was really something I had never experienced before. You can get a really beautiful sunrise eye look, mixing together the berries, the pinker tones with the yellows and these kind of orangey shades. They all blend so beautifully and you can create an incredible gradient with these mattes. And then the shimmers in here are really pretty too. These are some of Natasha's most interesting shimmer shadows. A lot of them are kind of duochromy or have a little bit of a flip or a shift to them. Here we have Awakening. You can see how beautiful and shiny that one is. And then Aster here is one that's kind of duochromy as well. There are those shades there, just really beautiful, nuanced shades. They're colors, but they're kind of neutralized colors in a sense. And I also like how this section of the palette here is a lot softer and can create actually quite a neutral look, even though there's not really a typical brown shade in this palette. You can still do quite a lot and it's really a versatile palette. I think the quality of mine has declined a little bit over time. I bought this pretty close to when it released, which was several years ago now. And I think that the intensity and the creaminess of a lot of those shadows has really gone downhill in the last year or so, which is understandable. I'm sure it's far past its expiration date, but I still keep it because it's really beautiful and I have such fond memories of working with that palette. Number 5 in my ranking is the Bronze palette. Now this is another one that's really beautiful and has these gorgeous shimmers. The shimmers in this are truly some of the most exceptional and shiny and like really good one and done type shimmers in this palette. There are a couple of them there. really high reflectivity and a lot of dimension in these shimmery shades here. To me, the downside of this palette is just that it's hard to get a lot of versatility from it. I find a lot of the looks that I do with this palette end up all looking pretty similar once they're on the eyes. So for that reason, it's not higher up in my ranking. But I think if you wanted to go for a look in this color story, this is a really great palette for that. The shade Silk in here, this one is one of my favorite shadows to just use just that shadow and put it all over my lid, on my lower lash line and my inner corner. It's truly a one and done shadow look. Number 4 in my ranking is Zendo, and it was really a toss-up between 3 and 4 in this ranking, but today I feel like Zendo is number 4. I love that you have the mix of warm and cool tones in here. Although it is a somewhat colorful palette, you can still do beautiful neutral looks with this one. There are a couple of really interesting metallics also in this one, like that shade right there. You can see a beautiful kind of bronze to greeny gold shift on that shade. This cream to powder breath right here is one of my all-time favorite eyeshadows. I love that color. And I just love the overall vibe of this palette. It's inspired by Zen. The shade names and the colors reflect that really beautifully. And it's just such a beautiful, earthy yet still somewhat colorful palette. Number 3 today is the Retro palette, which is actually the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today. Just like the bronze palette is one of the more monochromatic color stories that we have from Natasha Denona, but I just love how we have kind of warmer and cooler versions of these more mauvey, rosy tones all within this palette, so you can really take the look in whichever kind of temperature direction that you want to, but it's always going to turn out really beautifully. All of these shadows work together beautifully because it is such a monochromatic color story. I love that we have a number of cream to powder shadows in here, which is one of my favorite formulas to work with. I also really like that we have this topper shade here and this other light pink shimmery shades. I'm a sucker for light pink shimmers, and the fact that we have 2 of them in here is really fun. And perhaps part of the reason that this is so high up on my list today is because it is fall, and I think this is just such a great palette for this season. Okay, and down to the top 2. So my number 2 ranked Natasha Denona midi palette is the Glam palette. This is one that is quite cool toned, but I find that it still has enough balance in it for me to be able to wear it. I do have to be a little bit careful that I'm not going too cool toned, so I have to make sure I'm kind of mixing in some of the warmer or more neutral tones when I'm doing a look with this, because if I go too cool toned on my eyes, it can look a little bit harsh. But I find that this has enough balance, that it's still really flattering. It's super easy to work with. The quality of these shadows is excellent, and I love that we have a good mix of shimmers and mattes to work with here. There are quite a lot of shimmers, and I do love metallic and shimmery eyeshadows. So for all of those reasons, Glam is my number 2 choice, and I think it's just so easy for everyday use. And my number 1 ranked Natasha Denona midi palette is her newest one, her My Dream palette. Now, part of the reason that this is my number 1 could be that it's new and it's nice and fresh, and the color story is new, and it's still exciting for me to play around with these shades and put together different looks. But I just think that the quality of this one is the best of all of her midi palettes. The metallics and shimmers are super creamy, super dimensional. We have a couple of really beautiful duochrome shades in here, like these 2 here. There's even a multi-chrome down at the bottom here, which you can see the shifts better that way. The other more standard metallics are really stunning as well. The shade Babies here is one of my favorite eyeshadow shades ever. And it's not a multi-chrome or a duochrome or anything, but it's just still really dimensional and nuanced and a beautiful, exciting neutral shade. And then the shade Spontaneous as well as the super bright, creamy, gorgeous champagne tone. We do have a couple of the cream to powders in here, which are really fun to play with. And the more traditional matte formula in here is really stunning as well. I just think you can get such a wide variety of looks from this. These colors suit me really well. They're kind of more neutral, warm tones, but there's still a little bit of color going on. And I still get excited every time I use this, and I've loved every single look I've created with this, and I've been using this a ton since it came out. If you wanted to see my full review video on this palette, I will link that below, but that is my #1 ranked Natasha Denona midi palette. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below. I always love to see those. I'd love to hear what your favorite Natasha Denona palettes are, so let me know about that in the comments as well. If you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video.